struggling with binge eating with food intolerances? Do tune in. I'm going to give you some amazing tips on today's episode. Welcome to Stop Binging and Start Living. And from the title, this is exactly what I'm going to be helping you through this series in this podcast, through nourishment, movement, and mindset. Because when you understand where these habits are coming from and how to actually create a change, a positive change for the long term, you can start living your life today by creating a life free from binge eating. So I am so excited to have you here, and let's dive into today's episode. Binge eating and food intolerances. Trust me, that is a struggle that happened to me in my 30s, and it is quite a doozy. And if that is something that you're struggling with, do tune in. I'm going to share with you a few insights that can actually help you. So when we look in terms of the journey with binge eating, there's going to be always like ups and downs, learning curves, right? Life's going to throw you certain curveballs that you didn't expect. And then you might be like, oh my God, some of the old patterns of binge eating come back because, especially with food intolerances, there's now an array of food that is actually in a certain way forbidden. And if you didn't work on that mindset, the forbidden foods become tempting, and then you end up binge eating or overeating those foods that actually make your symptoms worse. It's a whole thing. So let's talk about in terms of, I'll give you a bit of my personal story when it happened and how I actually had to shift my mindset to keep my life binge free. Certain moments I went through some overindulgences, and sometimes even now I was like, oh, I love the gluten, but I can't eat the gluten, and I accept and allow it when it happens. So there's a big change that we need to do. And whenever we are struggling with binge eating, or we have a history of binge eating, and there's a food intolerance that can pop up at any age, and then there's actually this array of food that is forbidden from you from eating because it makes your body feel worse. So for me, for the 30 years in my life, I had no food intolerances. Everything was fine and dandy. I had I think I got a virus in my 30s when I went traveling to South Central America, somewhere down there. And what happened is that I came back, my digestion was off. I had gained 10 pounds. I didn't know why. I was always bloated. I was really, really not doing well. And I did what I do best. I actually investigated everything like a scientist to what was going on, to the point of I drove myself a little bit mad, and I drove a little bit mad my best friend, who was like my co-research pilot, if I can say that, trying to find what the problem was, because I did all the tests. I had tubes from here, I had tube from down the below, I did ultrasounds, I did everything possible. All the tests came out negative, but I still was not feeling good. And when you go through the state of you feel you have no control and no reason and no understanding what's happening, you kind of feel alone, because all the medical system told me everything was fine, but I knew something was not okay. They even told me, you should like eat better and exercise because of the 10-pound weight gain. That's not even, doctors, you should ask a little bit more about your patients, their history, just a little bit. Thank God that I had put that aside. All that struggle I had with my weight in my teens and my 20s. But here is the thing, to give you like a little bit of a short thing, I was able to actually understand maybe where my symptoms were coming from. I actually followed this strict type of eating, and my symptoms disappeared. I lost the inflammation, the 10 pound of inflammation, and I took out a big array of certain foods. And as I discovered more and more, I realized that whatever I caught, whatever virus or parasite I had, made me intolerant to 3 things: gluten, dairy products, and soya products. Again, I did the whole elimination diet. I reintegrated slowly certain things. And I realized gluten, that as soon as I would have like half a bagel, I would swell up like a pregnant lady. Not good. Same thing when I had dairy products, and same thing when I was having like tofu and soya. Oh my God, it was like deadly. So at one point I was like, okay, I need to give time for my body to heal. I took all those foods out. I felt better in my body. But then in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is not fun. And that was in the time that we didn't have the array of choices that we have right now of gluten-free products. And I was kind of angry. I was kind of angry that I caught something on this trip. I was kind of angry that maybe if I was diagnosed sooner with whatever that issue was, I would have been treated. And then I kind of got angry whenever I had a food that I knew was in a normal and decent size. I would feel like crap in my body the same way that I felt crap when I used to binge eat. Like, think I would have half a bagel and I couldn't fit into my pants anymore. It was really, really detrimental. I'm not there now, but in the beginning, I had to give myself time to heal from that inflammation. And I didn't fall back into binge eating, but I did fall in terms of that pattern of knowing I should not be eating that food, feeling like, who are you to tell me I should not be eating that food? That rebellious, like I'm rebelling against myself, you know? I'm sure we've all gone through these moments of rebelling against ourselves because my body's saying, don't eat gluten. And me, I was like, why can't I? Oh, special discussion I had in my brain. And that just made me eat the food. I overindulged in it. And I got into the pattern of, I already had the gluten, might as well, let me just eat gluten the rest of the weekend. And again, I was not eating like binge eating, but I was like still eating foods that my body did not like at all. And I'll start fresh on Monday. The dieting world mindset came back, but from a food intolerance perspective, I would still eat the gluten in healthy amounts that were good for me, but my body was just like, no, cut the gluten, please. But I was stubborn in that way. So I kept going in that vicious cycle, turning until I was like, okay, this is really not working out because the only real person I'm hurting here is myself. I'm hurting myself by having that gluten because physically I am not feeling good. And it was very hard to accept that I could not eat the gluten like I used to. And it was part of my day-to-day, my carbs, my desserts and everything, especially like dairy products and soya. Oh my God, like tofu, that's banned until now. Like I eat it and I'm not doing it. But I'm okay without tofu. I miss my bagels once in a while. But all this to kind of tell you that whenever there is a certain restriction from dieting, from a food intolerance, from an allergy, there is a part of us that feels like we got given like the short stick. We feel like we're cheated on. We feel like we're missing out on stuff. We feel like something got taken away from us. And it's really not a fun feeling at all. And I totally understand it. But then you actually have to take a moment of taking a step back and saying, okay, this happened. I cannot go back. I can only think of how I want to be today to move forward in my life. And if gluten is something that my body cannot digest, because I was going to the point of I should never eat gluten anymore, which made me want to eat all the gluten possible and then not eat the gluten. I kind of made a deal with myself. And maybe that might help you out as well. I was like, listen, because it's not an allergy, it's an intolerance. I just swelled up like a pregnant lady. Not the greatest, but listen to me a little bit. I'm going to share with you why. So I kind of had to reason myself that I had to get out of this all or nothing thinking that I started. It's like I had gluten. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. Might as well I have gluten all weekend and Monday I'll go gluten-free again. So I kind of went in the mindset of saying, okay, I went back to that all or nothing black and white thinking with the gluten. And I was like, listen, you can have gluten once in a while. You can understand the consequences. You'll be swollen or bloated, but it's much better to allow yourself to have that gluten when it's worth it and not now or never, which means I allowed myself to have gluten. If I go to a restaurant and there's pasta, I'm like, okay, I accept that today I feel like pasta. I will have the pasta. I will enjoy as much as I can. And that's it. I didn't get off my diet. I didn't fail. I didn't ruin anything. I accepted it. I accept the consequences. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? No, today I do not feel like feeling the negative aspects of the gluten, or this pasta is not worth it, or this cookie is not worth it. I started shifting in a different way of, is this worth it? Not, am I allowed? Am I not allowed? Looking into, is this worth it? Is this food worth it? And when I kind of shifted in terms of allowing myself to have it, because saying no, don't have it, it just messed up the whole system. When I told myself, allowing myself to have it, created a big shift, because then I'm just taking care of me and listening to me. Nobody said no. I'm listening in. But another thing as well I did is that I started creating all these variations of baking and having all these gluten-free products at home to make it easier for me, which means I started making my gluten-free muffins and cupcakes and pancakes. I have my gluten-free pasta, like rice and quinoa, we're fine with that. So I have all the gluten-free beer, like everything's gluten-free. Like now there's the choices, like, oh my God, it's everywhere. Even restaurants right now have gluten-free options. But 10 years ago, not so much. So I'm able right now to understand I am sensitive to gluten. I have all the gluten-free products at home like that. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. And I made the decision that if I'm going out somewhere and I ask myself, is this worth it? I even ask my friends and my partner, tell them, is this worth it? Is it worth it for me to have this piece of cake? Some of my partners like, no. And I was like, okay, I'm not missing out on anything. My partner says yes. I'm like, okay, give me a piece. And I give it and I enjoy that food in the moment of a choice of it's worth it, and I accept the bloating. But the more I added the gluten-free options at home, like that is not forbidden, the more I allowed myself to have that food. If I had a piece of cake today, I didn't ruin anything. I am allowing myself to have it. I am not having it out of stress or anxiety or anger. I'm having it because I'm making the choice to have that gluten-free. It changed the whole game. Because it goes to the same thing when you look at that mindset, that all or nothing. If I had a cookie, I ruined everything, might as well. I'm just going to get off my track all weekend and I'm going to get back on track on Monday. Something happens with food intolerances. We end up saying like, I had this one item, I failed. You didn't fail. You had a cookie, you had a piece of cake, you had half a bagel. You didn't fail. Your body's like, not my best day today, but it's okay. Your body will heal. Your body will deflate. And I know when I have gluten, it takes me 2-3 days to deflate from it. So I understand how my body works. So if you're going through overeating or binge eating and you have food intolerances, it's kind of making yourself a game plan, an acceptance plan, a middle plan of talking about intolerances here. Saying, okay, how can I create a healthy relationship with that food that I'm intolerant to? How can I bring in alternatives at home so I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything? And how can I get my environment or me saying, is this worth it today? If I eat it, I eat it. Again, it's a choice. No one's telling you no at all. But I'm always sitting there sometimes and I'm like, oh, this is worth it. Oh, this is not worth it. Or I'd have a bite and I was like, no, this is so not worth it. And by creating that shift, here's what happened. I am so much more free with all those foods, but as well, it actually helped my symptoms be better because I don't have all those weekends of just letting go with gluten, of like free for all. I don't have those, which means I'm giving my body more days of calmness and health and happiness. That when I have a gluten containing product, I don't swell up as much as I used to. You see what this is my body. Your body might be very different. But when we give our body space to heal, it might actually be able to tolerate better what you're bringing in once in a while. So this is where you look at food intolerances and binge eating and overindulgence, like they all come in together. So my all or nothing thinking came back in my 30s, but in a whole different perspective. I wasn't binge eating the gluten products. I was just angry I couldn't have gluten and then I would swell up. So I was like, okay, I made a deal with myself. I found a way, a peaceful way to be good with the food, to be good with my body, to still treat my body with respect, and still have those moments of going like certain foods. I'm like, I'm never going to say no to it. Certain foods that my mom makes, I will eat them. There's gluten in it. I accept it. But because I eat non-gluten most often, my body's able to tolerate having that product. And I would rather enjoy that moment, that meal with my family, having that little piece, whatever has gluten in it, enjoying it, and then saying, okay, no guilt, no anger. I move on to the next thing. I didn't fail at anything. I didn't let go of anything. I just moved on. And if you're able to create that shift in your mindset, and that we talk about a lot in terms of the all or nothing, that I talk a lot in terms of my Let's Eat the coaching program. There's a whole module about that of how can we go from the all or nothing to the right here, right now. because there's no good or bad. It's realigning yourself to what actually is better going to fit your lifestyle, your mindset, your eating habits, because there isn't a cookie cutter solution. Gluten, with another client, I would say something maybe different. I don't know, depending on what their symptoms are. But again, any all or nothing, black and white type of thinking in any area of your life will always drift you away from your goal. Because when you're letting go or you feel like you failed, you just fail the whole weekend and you get back on track on Monday. Same thing with work. Let's say you're supposed to finish a project and you didn't finish it on time. You're like, let me just let go of you. Like my example, I started watching one Netflix episode and I want to watch a second one. And I was like, oh my God, my day is done. I can't work. I'm like, no, you know what I do? I get back on my laptop at 5 p.m. and I finish the work that I want to do. I saw Netflix. It's okay. I had fun. Then I continue my work later. So again, all or nothing thinking is something very common with food intolerance that I went through again in my 30s when I healed everything in terms of binge eating, but something came back again. And this is this thing as well in terms of the journey, is that we're always a work in progress. As we're going to be healing and recovering from whatever food struggles we've had, there's going to be certain moments, certain curveballs in life that are going to be thrown our way that might bring back some of the cognitive distortions, the all or nothing thinking, the overeating, overindulgence, and then understand, hey, okay, something happened. I can grow and learn from this and develop a new coping mechanism, a new way of thinking, a new way of being to make sure that I can just put that to bed and just move on, just like I did with the gluten. So if you have any food intolerances and you're struggling with overeating, do know that we can actually create a symbiosis, a calmness of healing the binge eating, healing the inflammation as well. But there's a certain way of actually dealing with it. If you have food intolerances, you cannot go see any type of nutritionist, any type of coach, because you really want to make sure that you do mention you have the binge eating or the overeating in it. And I would say just message me so we can work on that together. I've gone through it. I've been working with it for the past 20 years. And there is a very delicate, sensitive, realistic way to actually help you stop binging and heal your inflammation that is related to certain foods. But make sure you actually make sure that you talk about those two, because those two have to go hand in hand when you're creating your journey to your best and healthiest self. So remember, if you have any questions, message me over on social media. And if you know anybody that would benefit from this podcast or this YouTube training, do share it with them, especially if you know somebody who's struggling with their eating and discovered maybe they have a food intolerance. Share this with them, because I think my story inspired a lot of my clients to say, hey, okay, I can get through this. I got through it, so you can get through it. So on that note, my name is Dina Marabi. I wish you a beautiful and a balanced day, and I'll catch you in the next episode.